How are we doing, folks? So before we get into Star Citizen and talking about the environment art, free resource available, the Lighting for Games Hub. This channel covers a lot of sort of higher level topics of game art, career, environment art, a bit of lighting. This board, you can find it in the comments below. Most 99% lighting. So it's got some of my videos on, my workflow process that I'm adding to in terms of how I go about lighting most of the time, and some of the best resources, some of the sources I've done, some of the resources other people have done, basically a central point for what we're doing. So that link will be in the description. And a big shout out to the cat army that we're building up. So the Patreons and career mentorship folks, thank you very much for supporting. Again, if you support Patreon videos, weekly feedback when we live stream Thursdays, and I also do the mentorships as well. That being said, let's get into Star Citizen. So yeah, this is going to be a fun one because this breaks a lot of the rules. If you've been following along with the, what, how, why series, this one is quite interesting because it's not a traditional workflow. So we've got a few images here for Star Citizen. We've got the references. We've got an art station that we can look at. Sci-fi, clean paneling, a bit of dirt here and there. It's, it's not medieval brick or anything like that. So the workflows are a little bit different, and we're going to get into that today. So let's first look at a really nice sort of modular breakdown by Ben Bushka. Butchering names as usual. So I like this breakdown because you get to see the modular parts, which is great. Modularity, again, used on a game like this. You get to see how it's put together, and we'll just take in the beauty shot of this for a moment. They're looking pretty cool. And then we'll go over to the wireframe. We've got a close-up of two areas. Now, Star Citizen is very interesting. So it uses a... Now, when we said this term, when I used to teach and we sort of spoke about this term, we called it mid-poly workflow, or face-weighted normal workflow is more commonly what it's called now. And it caused a mass confusion on the course. I remember it's like, oh, well, what's mid-poly? Do I do a high poly and then reduce it? Or do I do this, that? And it's, after a while, the teaching for it managed to kind of get ironed out. But yes, the mid-poly workflow essentially means you're not making high poly models to bake down. You're instead using the geometry that you make as the game resolution mesh. And you make it look high poly by having chamfers on and then weighting the normals of those chamfers to make them look like a subdivision edge almost. So when you look at this wireframe here from Ben, it was Ben, yeah, you can see that on pretty much most of the 90-degree edges, got some type of chunky pen. Yeah. So you've got, some sort of chamfer. See it down here. It's hard to find edges where there isn't a chamfer. And this is how the workflow kind of goes. You have the chamfer, and you basically, in Max, you put a face-weighted normals modifier on it. In Blender, I believe there's face-weighted normals. Maya, it probably has it nowadays, but when I used to use Maya, it didn't have this. You had to use a script called, I think it's called FWN add-on. But basically what it does is it sort of weights the normals to the larger surfaces. So if we say this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3, it's going to weight these larger surfaces across that chamfer. And I've got some images of some normals and some art tests that sort of cover this. But basically, make an edge, make a box, bevel it, put a face-weighted normals modifier in Blender, and watch the magic happen, or in Max. And the whole point of it is the meshes you make are the game res mesh. So it's actually pretty fast. You don't have to go through this workflow of doing a high poly, low poly, re-unwrap, bake, and vice versa. You just use the chamfers and you use tiling textures. So you'll use tiling textures of like, dirty paint, maybe the same texture with a tint on, so it's using the same base. But then you'll see all these little small details, little bolts, nuts and crannies and panels, and it looks like it's built into the mesh, but it actually isn't. These are all floated on. So the workflow that they use is they face weight their geo, And then they make these decal sheets. Now, decal sheets are a bit like when we talked about the Atlas trim sheet in a previous environment art video. I think it was Assassin's Creed, right? You do an Atlas trim sheet of just decals. And we have an example of that here from Thomas Carter. So we have some traditional sort of, tiling for a trim. And we've seen that before. If you've watched a ton of these videos, we've seen this sort of workflow before where you have a bit of tiling and then you go into unique detail. The only difference is, just like with that Assassin's Creed door we covered in the trim sheet, intro to trim sheet video, what we have here is just panels. Panels, buttons, hinges, bolts, made high to low poly, either stamped down. And what you essentially can do is you can use these on little planes of geometry and just float them above the surface ever so slightly. So we'll go back to our example here. And that's what you see here, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And the power of this is you're not committing the actual detail to the shape. So you can just move this stuff a little bit to the left, or a little bit to the right, like the art director meme where it's like, you can move this stuff and you're good to go, essentially. So they actually have tools where you can stamp these things on at an angle and stamp them on the normals that the face is facing on and all that sort of stuff. But when you combine this with the face-weighted normals workflow, you start to get really juicy looking details like we have here. Same with this one, right? So we've got, you'll rarely see a pure 90-degree edge, especially if the player is going to get up close to it, because they're always chamfering and they're always weighting the normals. And like I say, it uses the larger faces of that and weights it across the chamfer. I think we'll have some examples though in a minute. The same sort of thing. Once you see that anatomy of how you have the face-weighted normals geo and then the planes on top, every time you see a breakdown from a Cloud Imperium Games artist, you're going to see that sort of stuff, right? So you're going to see the chamfers on all the edges and then weighted, and then using a decal sheet. They probably have a ton of decal sheets shared that they can just use as a team, right? I mean, the game's been in development for like 100 years, so they probably have fair few amount of decal sheets as well. Yep, and then what did we put here? Yeah, little floating planar shapes. They use the decal sheet to project bolts, panels, all that sort of good stuff on the surfaces to give it that tertiary detail. Otherwise, you just have basically primitive geometry with chamfers on with a tiling texture, and then you've got no tertiary, no second level read, no construction details, no storytelling details. Same with the ships. The ships are so big that you don't 0 to 1 bake them in a lot of the cases, right? You use this workflow, you chamfer stuff, you stamp on decals, and then because it's a tileable texture, you can get the resolution that you need from that. Here's a texture version of what we just saw. So again, clean sci-fi paneling. You can see here that the decal sheets are carrying a lot of the detail. Otherwise, without that sort of second read, you would essentially just have quite a boring looking sort of scene. But that second read is crucial for this stuff as well. Yeah, cool. Another thing is, depending on the artist you're looking at, you will see some of them do care about having really thin triangles and some of them don't, because what you do get with the face-weighted normals is it can cover a lot of dodgy topology areas. Like if you've ever had a mesh where you've got long triangles on a face and you soften the normals and you get that sort of faceted gradient look, if you use a face-weighted normals modifier, it kind of like fixes that 99% of the time. So yes, you will see thin triangles in a lot of the wireframes, like especially here, it's so thin it goes to black, right? But they get away with it in most cases because of the face-weighted normals modifier as well in this case. And the topology is at a pretty decent level. I believe that they LOD based on face size, not topology count. So it'll look at the actual sizes of of the topo and load from there, which is pretty cool. Could be wrong about that, but that's what is on the grapevine. But yeah, you can see here just like lots of little, once you get into it, it's super flexible. You can make stuff really quickly. Scroll over to this art test. So this art test, Cloud Imperium art test, is everywhere. It's like you can't get enough of it, but it's good because you get to see people's breakdowns. So this is John van Zuylen. And what's great about this breakdown is you can really see how they've kind of gone about it with breakdowns. So we've got some beauty shots. Again, this looks awesome. And we'll get to the breakdowns, which is what we want to focus on. So yeah, they've got blend masks. They've got their normal map for sort of their decal and stamping on sheet. So this is that decal sheet. This is very similar to this, but obviously in their own version. So they've got a tileable part at the top that goes left to right. And then they've got some decals, bolts, sort of paneling, all sorts of sci-fi bits and bobs that will be used on those planes. Wireframes as well. So I think this looks like it's from Maya, but you can see this one's a bit cleaner to look at really, but you can see that, you know, you're not going to spot an edge that doesn't have a chamfer in most cases. And then you see the second read of all the planes floated on top. And, you know, there's just a single chamfer segment on a lot of this stuff. And it's weighted. When you phase weight it, it looks nice and juicy and clean and ready to go. But yeah, this one looks pretty cool. Any other areas of topo? No, that's pretty much the recipe. Chamfer, don't leave 90-degree edges. Use your tertiary detail. Map to textile density. Use tileable textures. And you're good. Some more here. You see on the floor, that's where it gets really juicy, right? You just got lots of little planes for the detail. And then, you know, matching, trying to put it at angles to match as good as you can. Again, thin triangles. So there is a criticism that thin triangles are bad. That may be true, and I have seen it cause issues in the past. I'm seeing it a lot more, especially with the nanite workflow, and it's not causing issues a lot of the time. So never say never, but there's a lot of examples out there where there's thin triangles. So just be wary of when it can go wrong and when to break the rules on that. But yeah, same recipe again, chamfers, little planes of detail, and it's all good to go. You see here, these are panel lines, so they're just using face and just extruding around like a ribbon, like where my mouse is tracing around. And that's probably part of a trim sheet that has an indent that you can just float in, and then you're good to go, essentially. But what's good is you can just type in here, right? Cloud Imperium art test. And most of them are really good. You can just see like how people go about the workflow. I love the lighting on this one. And you can tell, right? If they've got an art test and then it says they work at Cloud Imperium, they probably passed it. But you see different styles as well. So some people go for chunkier bevels on some shapes, thinner bevels on the other, but they still do the weighting on it. The same sort of deal, right? You get enough of these art tests, you look at how the wireframes are, you'll be able to replicate this workflow, no problem. You know, fundamentals of modularity, fundamentals of masking and using tileable textures. This is a good one, before and after. So your standard model, doing a single segment chamfer, and then you get that beam of light, which you usually get from sub-D modeling, but it's not, it's just weighted on there. And then material work. So yeah, Star Citizen uses a face-weighted normals modifier workflow. It's a mid-poly workflow. You don't have to commit to high poly meshes and bake them down and be stuck in that sort of, I would say, like slow process. It can be quite slow. You've got tileable textures to meet textile density. You've got decal sheets to meet the tertiary detail. You've got shader work to mix and match and, you know, blend with in the engine. And that's how you can create these vast worlds that look consistent and are ready to go. So, yeah, good stuff overall. Hopefully that illuminates a little bit on that workflow. And if you're doing anything sci-fi, especially at university, give this workflow a try. You'll actually get a lot done as you're not committing to a high to low process for every shape. But cool. Other than that, folks, for now,